So this is the introductory rite. We have this opening prayer, and then you flip over to 16, and then we have the liturgy of the word. So we have 4 different readings. We have the first reading, which is Old Testament. We have a reading from one of the Psalms. There's 150 Psalms. We have the second reading, which is the New Testament, usually. And then we have the Gospel. And we all stand for the Gospel. Now, if you look at the other page I gave you, the one that has a lot of black on it, you'll see that something that's really awesome about the liturgical cycle, the liturgical readings, the liturgical year, is that it's set. So, at any given Catholic church, on any given day, around the whole world, no matter what country, they're reading the same reading. The priest is preaching on the same thing. And so there's a 3-year cycle for Sundays. We have year A, year B, year C. And these are the year of Matthew, the year of Mark, and the year of Luke. John's writings are interspersed in those 3. And so, if you look, right now we're in year B, which is the year of Mark. And we just had, I'm on the top left, we just had Sunday 29. And so it tells you what the reading is about and what the reference is. And so when we get down to the end, we go into the next year, and that's year C. So this, you'll notice there's 34 Sundays, but there's 52 Sundays in a year. It doesn't include things like Easter and Lent and Advent. These are what's called ordinary time. So we can see that we go through this. The church has taken us through all the readings of the Bible. And so this is just the gospel. But right, there's the first and the second reading, the Psalms as well. If you flip over to the back, this is just an example of the second reading. So you see there on the left column, the Sundays, walking you all the way through the year. And again, we can see that we consecutively hear the different readings from the Scriptures. And the church is unveiling this for us. So this is all Sundays. But there's also daily Mass. And I didn't give it to you just to avoid confusion, but there's a separate cycle. There's 2 years for daily Mass. There's year 1 and year 2. And so if you go to Sunday Mass and daily Mass, you'll get the whole Bible in a short amount of time, just by going to Mass, which is the whole idea. Okay. So, we have notice we stand for the gospel. We stand to show respect for these primary writings. And after the gospel, we sit down, and the priest usually gives a homily. And then after the homily, we have the creed, the profession of faith, everything we believe. So I'm on page 18 now. And this is the summary of the catechism. This is the summary of everything that we believe as Catholics. I want to point out to you that about halfway down, we acknowledge the incarnation, the fact that the invisible God became man, that's Jesus Christ, with our bodies. So that's why it says in red on the right, bow. So when we get to the words, for us men, for our salvation, he came down from heaven, we'll bow like this. By the power of the Holy Spirit, with one Virgin Mary, became man. And we stand back up. So this is a way of acknowledging the incarnation by humbling ourselves, by lowering our heads. The Apostles' Creed is a shorter version. That's said sometimes, special masses, but not typically. So that concludes the liturgy of the Word. And then we go into the liturgy of the Eucharist. So sit down, and the preparations of the altar begin. The altar is the table-like structure in the front of the church. An altar is 2 things. It is a place of sacrifice. If you think of the Old Testament, the animals are sacrificed on the altar. And it's also a place of a meal. That's why it's a table-like structure. So sacrifice and meal. What is the sacrifice? The one sacrifice of Christ on the cross. Do we re-sacrifice Christ in each Mass? No. We go back in time, we go to the foot of the cross, the one sacrifice, because God takes us outside of time in every Mass. So we have, in preparation, we have some, usually a song, and the priest priest will say some prayers, usually just low to himself that we don't hear. And then there's a dialogue that begins. I'm on page 22 now. There are different prayers throughout the year, and you can see them alluded to there. Then there's the acclamation, where we join our words to the angelic host. And this is one of those references I gave you on the sheet, where we say, holy, holy, holy. This is how the scriptures tell us that the angels and saints worship in heaven. So we're saying the same words with those who are worshiping God in heaven. And then we kneel. So before this point in the Mass, we've sat, we've stood, and now we're kneeling. So there's something very special about this point of the Mass. On page 24, you'll see Eucharistic prayer number 1. There's 4 Eucharistic prayers, the main ones, that are typically used. I'm going to flip over to the third one. It's on page 33. So remember St. Justin Martyr was talking about how for a considerable amount of time that he who presides gave thanks, praise to God. So this is what the priest was doing. He's giving thanks and praise to God. And he calls the Holy Spirit down. It's called the epiclesis, the prayer of the Holy Spirit to come down upon these gifts, because we're offering a gift to the Father. What is the gift we're offering? The best gift we could come up with, Jesus himself. So we actually offer Jesus to the Father. Think about that. But what's really awesome is that we get to be joined with that gift. There was a church that, or I should say first that the collection, there's also a collection that's taken up just before this, collection of money to aid the church. And there was this one church that had a big basin up in the front, a big bowl. And when it was time for the collection, the children were encouraged to take some money from mom and dad and run up and throw it in. And one little boy ran up and threw it in, and he fell into the basin, and then he couldn't get out, so he was screaming and crying, and the kids were running over, so it was chaotic. So it was a rough day for that kid, but it proves a really great analogy in that kid became part of the offering that was offered up to God. So you can think of that when you think about, when I come to Mass, I am joining myself in this offering. I'm offering myself as a gift. And so that's why we think about preparing ourselves.